right, guys, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's nice to, I can't see you all, but nice to see your names and to know that you're here. I guess it's the virtual, get together that I guess we've all gotten accustomed to. It's nice to see everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Racheli. I work for Nefesh B'Nefesh, and this program is part of the community integration programming. Nefesh B'Nefesh, I'm sure, as you all are familiar with, and we assist immigrants who are coming from North America in their integration process in Israel. Our department is dedicated to creating programming to assist the Olim after they arrive. And part of that is reaching out with information and helping people in their pre-Aliyah stage and in planning their big move to Israel, become familiar with the different resources, begin their networking journey, and kind of become familiar with the different people and communities that they need to know when making their decisions about how to live where and how to live their life in Israel. So we're excited that you've all decided to join us tonight to hear more about young professional life in the two main spots of young professional life in Israel, and that's Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And we're very fortunate to have a panel here of real live representatives of the two hot cities, Morty, Shomit, and Eric, and we're going to introduce all of them in just a bit. I just kind of wanted to give a bit of an introduction about myself, even though I'm here just as a moderator. My name is Racheli. Like I said, I made Aliyah about 10 and a half years ago, right when I graduated high school. After a gap year program, I did a year of national service in Jerusalem, and I studied in Bar Ilan University, which is in the center of Israel. And I lived just off campus, right next to the university for my years there. After which I spent a bit of time living in Jerusalem as a young professional, and then I moved to Tel Aviv as a young professional. And I have a obviously it's only my personal experience from both cities, but I got to know both cities really well and the different social environments there. So I feel excited and honored to be able to share a bit of my experiences with you and kind of reflect on the two cities and what they have to offer in terms of social environment and everything that you're looking for in a community, together with the other panelists here tonight. So before we kind of go into the panelists that have joined us and hear a bit about them, I wanted to kind of give a bit of at least my perspective, or a commonly accepted perspective, of these two cities for a few minutes, and give a bit of background, I guess, I would say, for the two cities. So we'll start with Jerusalem. And I think for the most part, people are familiar with it as often if you've been here before on a birthright trip or on a tour group, it's very highly associated with being the holy city, and you have the old city and a lot of history. And it's more associated, I would say, with the past of Israel, whereas Tel Aviv is more associated with the future and a very innovative spirit. And obviously the very strong connection to the startup nation and the large amount of startups that exist there. And those are the two main associations with that. But when you're living here as a young professional, you get a really different side, get to see a really different side of those cities. I would say, and I'm excited to hear our panelists' input on each of these topics, but I would say that in Jerusalem, it's a bit more of an environment that's, I don't use the word segregated, but separated into different neighborhoods that have a very distinct personality. There's a very artsy and multicultural environment of Nachlaot that's right outside of the Shuk, and you have a bit of the more suburban area, we'll call it, of Baka and Kasamon. You have the kind of far out suburbs that have more settled, larger homes and a more out of the city environment of Arnona. You have the center of town that also is very mixed and diverse in where people are coming from and their backgrounds and what they're looking for, and also very hustle and bustly and middle of the city kind of feeling. Whereas in Tel Aviv, I think as much as there are separate areas and each neighborhood definitely has its own personality and own vibe, there's more of a fluidity, which I think is very characteristic of the city itself. It's right off of the beach, and in general, as much as Jerusalem's a very intense city, and Tel Aviv has this calm, even though there's a buzz and an energy, there's a fluidity, there's kind of a chillness that just comes along with being a beach city, being at the heart of Israel's really what Israel has to offer in terms of its laid back environment. You'll see like going into an office in Tel Aviv is nothing like entering a professional office anywhere else in the world. There's the warmth and there's the camaraderie that people feel with each other. And while Tel Aviv has this exciting, innovative, like I said before, spirit that is very connected to the professional environment that exists there, and this like resilient, innovative, exciting startup scene that's happening there with investors from all over the world who see this as like the #1 spot next to Silicon Valley of innovative and creative spirit and bringing that to life and scaling creative solutions. And that's something that overflows, I would say, into every aspect of the social life in Tel Aviv, at least in my experience it was. It's just because by virtue of the fact that everyone is participating kind of in that professional journey and professional adventure. So everyone has a part in it. And it doesn't matter what your background is, like everybody is kind of part of, even if you're not working for a startup or necessarily in that VC world, you're lending a hand to helping move forward this like movement of Israeli innovation and being at the center and the hub of that. So that lends true also to the type of social environments that people can find themselves in, parties and friends that you make. Like everyone feels a sense of oh, you're new here, hey, I want to be a part of making a home for new people and creating new friendships, because you kind of never know where that friendship is going to lead. I think it's true in Israel in general, but I found it specifically in Tel Aviv. It was kind of in a heightened sense. So that's my like 2 cents just to introduce the two cities. And I wanted to give a chance for Shlomit and Eric and Morty to give a bit background about themselves and get to hear a little bit just about where they're coming from, what they're doing now before we delve into the questions. So Shlomit, do you want to start us off?
Sure, no problem. Hi, everyone. My name is Shlomit Cymbalista. I'm originally from New York, from Long Island. I went to school there and then I studied biology at Binghamton University in upstate New York. And about 8 months after I graduated, I made Aliyah. I did do Ulpan in Jerusalem, in Ulpan Etzion, which a lot of young professionals and college graduates do attend. And it's a 5-month program where you're really kind of living on a campus with other young professionals while you're studying Hebrew for half the day. And then afterwards, I moved to Tel Aviv and started working in medtech for the last 8 years or so. So I don't have a lot of experience living in, the real Jerusalem community, because I think Ulpan Etzion is a bit of a bubble. But I've been living in Tel Aviv for the last 7 years or so, and I'm happy to talk more about it later on.
Well, Eric, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Eric Nero. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. And after high school, I spent a year doing a gap year program, the Nativ Leadership Program through USCJ, where I lived in Jerusalem and studied Hebrew University for half a year and spent the second half volunteering in a development town in the Negev called Yerucham. After I finished college, I went to work for the Jewish National Fund immediately afterwards as a fundraiser in the Mid-Atlantic region. And when I was 27, I decided to make Aliyah. I made Aliyah in 2016, originally to Jerusalem, where I spent my first year working for the Israel Experience at Kiryat Moriah, where the Jewish Agency is housed, and subsequently moved to Tel Aviv a year later and continued working for Jewish National Fund in Israel as the Israel communications officer dealing with the public relations and marketing for JNF USA here in Israel.
Morty, that leaves you.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Morty Durovin. I'm originally from Los Angeles. It's funny, after hearing everyone's stories, I find similarities and common ground with everyone else who's, representing tonight. So I made Aliyah after high school. I went to Eula, for those that are familiar with it. I came for a gap year. I went to a Hesder Yeshiva in Ma'ale Adumim. It was there that I really fell in love with Israel and really understood what kind of person, I wanted to be and where I wanted my life to be. And so I came back from my gap year, my first year in Israel a little bit early, decided to make Aliyah, finished Hesder, did the army. It was fantastic. I highly recommend for those that this is still relevant for. Post army and post finishing of the Hesder program, which is around 5 years. I went to school here. I went to Machon Lev, which is the Jerusalem College of Technology. And I studied business. And during that time, I worked a bunch of different odd jobs to, support myself and get myself through school. I was a tour guide. I was a madrich. I also worked at the Israel Experience for around a year. So Eric, it's funny we didn't overlap there. And it was actually I interviewed at Nefesh B'Nefesh. And unfortunately, the position wasn't relevant for me, but I did speak with the head of employment there, and she was like, let me look out for you. And she connected me with my current boss, where I've been working for the past almost 4 years at Fin Partners, which is an international communications firm. And yeah, that's my story.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, everyone. All right, we're gonna start getting into some of the questions. We have some really important and I think get to really the essence of what a person would be looking for in the two communities with all these questions. So we're gonna start on a bit of a more basic explanation level, since I obviously didn't get into any of the details about each of the cities. So could one of you tell us what are the most popular neighborhoods for Olim in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem? Would you say there's one area that all the Olim live? Is it kind of divided amongst different neighborhoods? Could you tell us a bit about the vibes of the different neighborhoods that I was referring to? Morty, how about you start?
Sure thing. Okay, so in Jerusalem, it's going to be Katamon. That is the big neighborhood that's where everyone lives. It's also going to be Baka, which is really across the street pretty much from Katamon. There are a lot of people now that also live in the Talpiot area, which is more industrial. And that's where, a lot of new jobs are currently being developed there. Also in Arnona, and I live in Talbia, which is Rehavia-ish area. There's a small community here. And yeah.
Thanks. Okay, yeah, Eric, you want to go for Tel Aviv?
Yeah, so I'll add a little bit about Jerusalem because that's where I first lived as well. I think that one of the unique things, especially now, 4 years later, that I really see is how unique each community is and how you can live a very different kind of Israel. So I lived in Makor Chaim when I first made Aliyah to Jerusalem, which is right near where Morty was saying. It's in the Baka, Talpiot, Katamon area, which is on the south side of the city. You also alluded to Racheli earlier, the Nachlaot area, which is very much the center of the city, Makor Baruch, and some of the areas around there in the downtown area. You have a vastly different community. It's much more city-like. You also have a nice mix of not only Anglo-Olim, but you also have secular young Israelis that live there, many of whom are either studying or graduates from Hebrew University that are still living in the area, or Betzalel, or any of the other local colleges around there. One of the things that I found when I was living in Jerusalem was how many young Israelis I met, because I'm a secular Jew, because I did not go to yeshiva and was not so involved in the synagogue life. I found that a lot of my contemporaries that I really connected with were actually the secular Israeli Jews or secular Olim who were coming to live there, who lived in many different areas of the city. Now it's similar in Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv, I've lived in 3 different neighborhoods. I first lived in Lev Ha'ir, right near the beach, near the American Embassy. Most people know that area. It's very, very touristic. It's along the promenade. And I had a wonderful experience there, especially the contrast between the Jerusalem area with all the parks and the trees and a lot more of this, what I felt was Israeli community, meaning the vibe, the atmosphere I felt much more in the Middle East. When I was living in Tel Aviv, I felt much more that this was a cosmopolitan city, that it was very, very Mediterranean. I also lived in Tzafon Yashan, which is the Old North, along Park HaYarkon, which is also vastly different. The community in Levair, a lot of them were young professionals, a mix of Israelis and Americans, people from all over the world. When I lived in the Old North, there was a lot more young couples and young families, as well as a mix of young singles that were also living there. I currently live on Rothschild Boulevard in the center of the city, which is a different world in of itself from the other two places that I previously lived. Of which you have a complete mix. The house next to mine is a lot of kids live there. My building is mostly young singles or young couples. And then scattered throughout, you have people from all over the world. It's a huge mix that I don't think you can categorize. But one of the really, really unique things, and I think that Shlomit can allude to this because she's lived in a couple of different neighborhoods than I have as well, is how much the experience changes, even just going over a few blocks. I won't talk about all of the neighborhoods, but even just a little bit south, you have the Florentine area, which is a little bit more artistic and a little bit more of a unique vibe than you'd have in the other parts of Tel Aviv. Even Yafo, to the south of Tel Aviv, which did at once seem like such a faraway place, is really up and coming in terms of young people moving there from Israel, from the United States, from all over the world. And Shlomit, if you want to talk a little bit more about the neighborhoods of Tel Aviv.
Sure. I've basically split my time, as Eric mentioned, between the Old North and where I'm living now, which is very much the center. I think most people first moving to Tel Aviv from abroad, be it young couples or young Jewish professionals, young singles, the Old North is generally just a softer landing. It's being in the city without constantly feeling like you're in the city. It's quieter neighborhoods. There's more space. The apartments generally are bigger there, especially if it's a little further from the beach. And then I think as people get more comfortable in the city, they slowly start moving towards the center and towards the south. Again, the Old North is a 10-minute walk from the center. Nothing in Tel Aviv is that far from each other. But I could say like I lived there for a year or two, and then now I'm living right next to Dizengoff Center, which is 10 minutes from the Old North, 10 minutes from the Shuk, 10 minutes from Erica and Rothschild. So it's louder, it's busier, it definitely has more of a city feel. But once you get used to the area, there's just a really great vibe, especially people coming from places like New York City or Boston or Philadelphia. If you miss that rush, you could find your place right in the center, but you could also find yourself a 10-minute walk from there. Then you feel like you're in just this quiet, peaceful suburb of Tel Aviv at the same time. And as Eric mentioned, some people who are kind of looking for that more artsy, out of the ordinary experience, Florentine is super up and coming. It's a little bit further from the beach, so I'll give you a warning. If you're moving to Tel Aviv to be near the beach, Florentine is not the best choice. But again, everything's walking distance in Tel Aviv, which is great. And Yafo, I personally love. It is such a cool community. It's such a cool area. And some people are actually definitely choosing to move down there. I just personally, because of, my Shabbat and religious community, choose to stay in the center. If I would, was willing to move farther for my friends or would travel on Shabbat, I would be much more open to moving down to Yafo.
I remember that people used to say, I've had friends who've compared it to New York City. Old North is kind of like the Upper West Side, Yafo or Florentine or somewhere like the East Village and Soho. Dizengoff's a bit like Midtown. So you can always find your...
On a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Like I always say, Tel Aviv is like New York meets Miami. So you could take those areas of New York and then throw in a little bit of that
Miami. Yeah.
I think that one of the other things, making the comparison between New York and Tel Aviv, many of my friends who live in New York and many times when I've been to New York, I've gone to Manhattan and haven't had the time to go to Brooklyn because it's so far away. Tel Aviv is a small city. Israel is a small country. You can live somewhere and it doesn't preclude you from being able to enjoy everything else that Israel has to offer. I mean, you can walk literally from the Old North along the promenade and be in Jaffa, depending on what your pace is, let's say 45 minutes. It's not really that far. Buses run, they run up and down the city, so everything is accessible. And everywhere that you live doesn't preclude you from being able to meet with friends or be part of those other communities as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so going off of that same kind of, for the first question about like finding your place in the different neighborhoods and their different environments, could we maybe talk a little bit about how to find a community when you get to a place that has so many Olim, an overwhelming amount of events and programs going on, even during a time of virtual programming? Kind of how do you you land, you maybe can find an apartment, you set up roommates, but beyond that, what are ways that a person can find a sense of community amongst this like ocean of young professionals that are living in these two main centers of community? Shlomit, maybe do you want to start?
Yeah, for sure. Because I very much relate to this because when I was living in Jerusalem, or actually did a bit of time in Givat Shmuel, I found it was very hard to meet new people. And in Tel Aviv, I found that people were extremely, and you touched upon this, there's such an open environment of meeting new people and bringing new people into your life and making new friends. So whenever there's, someone new to the community, everyone's been in that boat. So they very much can relate to that. I think, and again, I kind of want to focus on non-COVID times because it's definitely more, it's more difficult now. But I think that the big ways to do for me, I made a lot of my friends through synagogue and through going to Shul on Shabbat and the religious community, which is really great, even though the people who go are from all different backgrounds. So I have friends who some are more observant than others. And then, I started inviting people over for Friday night dinner. And I'd meet someone in Shul and I'd be like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. Let's grab coffee, come over for dinner, and just kind of put myself out there as in like, I have nothing to lose. And I just made a lot of friends that way. I joined a local book club. And then you get thrown into this WhatsApp group with all these other, ladies in Tel Aviv who also like reading. And then you meet every 6 weeks and you have cocktails and you have something to relate about. And eventually you actually become friends with these people for things not related to books. A lot of networking events or, like after work events. I'm always on Facebook seeing what's going on during the week, grab one friend to come with me, and just, introduce myself to people wherever I go. And just, you start collecting them.
And I think I wanted to add to what you're saying. I think that, like you said, the environment there just kind of lends itself to that. Like in another place where it would be intimidating maybe to really put yourself out there, or for some people it would be even more challenging. I think like the environment in Tel Aviv kind of makes it, I mean, I think this is true in Jerusalem also. I felt it much more in Tel Aviv, that it's kind of like mitbakesh, like you're, that you're missing out if you're not pushing yourself to like go to those events and look for more events and put yourself out there when you are at those events.
Receptive. I think in other cities around the world, maybe people kind of like to stay in their close circles, but in Tel Aviv, there's a very receptive response to that. Or like, for example, I know Eric because I have Nefesh B'Nefesh Volunteer Day. We went down one Friday to pick vegetables and to volunteer down there on the farms, and made a new friend years later. So there's just always these opportunities being presenting themselves in the city.
Yeah, absolutely. Morty, do you want to talk maybe a bit about that in Jerusalem?
Yeah, sure thing. It's funny. I find Jerusalem to be also exceptionally warm when it comes to bringing in new people. For me, I've been here now for a couple of years. I lived back to the previous conversation about different areas of Jerusalem. So I lived in the Arnona area when I was in school. I also lived in the old, like the Katamonim area. And now I live more in the middle of town. And so I've been a part of so many different communities, even while being in this, small city of Jerusalem. I think people, obviously, right, speaking, pre-Corona times, we all met at shul, we all met at synagogue, and you hang out, at the kiddush or whatever it is. But also there's so many festivals and so many things that are usually happening, whether it's the wine festival or I guess the beer festival. There are museums. Not everything is just alcohol focused. There's a lot going on.
Most things are alcohol focused.
Most popular events are alcohol focused. Yeah, but really there's just a lot going on here, and it's funny because you'll be invited to WhatsApp groups, believe it or not. I know in the States WhatsApp isn't a big deal. Here it's pretty huge. And you just hear about all these different events and activities that are happening through these WhatsApp groups. And I have a friend who made Aliyah, 4 or 5 months ago. And at first she was like, I made Aliyah during a pandemic. Who am I going to meet? How am I going to establish myself? And here a couple months later, she's, she just knows everyone, and she has meals set up for Shabbat. She is, during the week, she has all these, friends coming to hang out with her. And she's going, to hang out with them. She's really made a vibrant community for herself, and embraced what Jerusalem has to offer, which I found to be really cool.
I think like when you see other people experiencing that, you realize, like, you see your roommates or people at work or people that you start meeting, other people experiencing that, you realize like you want to create that for yourself, and that it's available. Like so means that like people are just receptive to that. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk, going off of that a bit more. Could we talk a bit about what a typical weekend looks like? Eric, maybe you want to start this one?
Sure. Well, it's having lived in both Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, your weekends look vastly different. And it all depends what kind of environment you're in. When I first moved to Israel, unlike most people, I did not do Ulpan. I immediately went to work. And I found that, I was working through the work week, and I had this pressure to figure out, okay, what am I going to be doing on Shabbat? Because I didn't have a car, public transportation's closed. I lived in Jerusalem, where many of my friends were Shomer Shabbat, and I had other friends who weren't. So it was a very, very different type of dynamic. You'll see on Facebook people writing last minute posts, who's got a space open for Shabbat, and then 5 people write, I do, and then you go to somebody's house, you meet 3 other people there, and now all of a sudden you have your little Shabbat club. And I'm not religious, but Shabbat meals were a big thing culturally that was getting involved. As I started to solidify myself here, and my life's a little bit different. I married. I live with my wife in Tel Aviv. She's Israeli, so many Friday nights we're going to family, either her family or my family. We have a car, so on weekends we spend a lot of time going out for a day trip. If you drive an hour in any direction, you get to a vastly different place. So we do a lot of hiking, and we do a lot of trips before Corona. You go up north, an hour, and you can hit 3 different wineries. You go to these beautiful gardens. There's cultural events that go on the weekends. What I would do, one of my favorite activities when I was living in Jerusalem, I would meet up with one of my secular friends because most of the stuff was closed on Shabbat. We'd walk to the old city of Jerusalem, and we'd walk along the train park past the Tachana Rishona, the first station, which is in Talpiot, which is in Talbia, near where Morty lives, and continue on and just kind of enjoy being outside. You'll see all of these people just kind of outside enjoying the day, which is such a unique thing. Especially, coming from Baltimore, people would be outside, but not at the way that you see it here. You'll see a lot of people, they just sit at the park. They have their coffee, portable coffee stove and a picnic blanket, and just meeting with friends. And so we'd walk through, and we'd go to the park, and we'd go to the old city of Jerusalem. We'd sit down for a cup of coffee in the Christian Quarter, and just kind of walk around. Living in Tel Aviv, almost every single weekend you can be guaranteed to see at least 10 people just sitting on the beach. Everybody hangs out at the beach. Everybody's walking around. Everything's still open. So it's very, very similar to what my weekend looked like living in the United States. There was a lot less change. But I think that the more that you integrate into the Israeli mentality, Thursday nights are for socializing and going out. Fridays, for the most part, you have to set aside a little bit of time to do your chores for the weekend because nothing's going to be open on Saturday that you need. And very many people, for the most part, on Friday night, whether you're religious or you're not religious, you're still going to do dinner with somebody. And meals are a very big part of the Israeli culture. And then Saturdays are for enjoying the Shabbat, however one decides to do that.
So actually, going off of that Shabbat idea and continuing to talk about the weekend, so maybe there's a question here in the chat about more modern Orthodox leaning communities or shuls in Tel Aviv. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I was literally in the process of answering that question. I don't really know what the intention of more was, but I do think that the community in Tel Aviv is largely diverse. There's probably a shul or synagogue on every corner. The community, even let's say you'd call the modern Orthodox community, for Olim or for Olim and local and Israelis, it's arranged within the shul. You know, when you'll have a mix of everyone at a Friday night dinner. So it's a very open community. But if you are looking for modern Orthodox community or Dati Leumi, be it more Anglo or more Israeli, there are tons of options in Tel Aviv. On a Friday night, you're not looking for a Friday night dinner. You're generally having to pick between one of a million invites or hosting yourself. There's always a kiddush at shul. There is always learning during the week or on the weekends in the different synagogues. I know my old roommate used to attend what's the word? Like a mixed minyanim of men and women together. So really, whatever your niche is, wherever you identify, I really believe Tel Aviv has a place for you where you'll find yourself and you'll find your community. But I do think that in the past, Tel Aviv had this reputation of not being a religious city or it being difficult to be religious in Tel Aviv. And I can't tell you how much it's wrong. I actually moved to Tel Aviv because I used to visit a friend on Shabbat and fell in love with the community and the shul community. I just felt it was so warm and open compared to other places, which were more insular in Israel. And it's grown exponentially over the last 7 years. I remember I would go to Kiddush on Shabbat afternoon after shul. There were 50 people. Now there would be like 350 people. So it's just a great place to be if you want a religious life and you want a religious community, but Jerusalem might not be, the right fit for you.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to take a little bit of a different direction and come back to that in a little bit and talk a bit about employment in these two super important cities in terms of Israel's employment landscape. Let's talk a bit. Morty told us already a little bit about how he found his job at Finn or how he got connected there. Let's talk about needing Hebrew to find your job. So Eric, I know you work mostly in English. You work with an American organization. Shlomit, can you tell us a bit, because you're working, I imagine, with Israelis and Americans in the same environment? Can you tell us a bit about needing Hebrew to do your job? How did you find your job originally?
So I actually only have worked with Israelis over the last 8 years in my current job. So let me just give a background what I do. I work in med tech, so it's high tech but medicine. I work for a company called Zebra Medical Vision. They develop AI technology for radiologists, so it falls within the world of digital health. And so I've been there for 3.5 years, and I worked at a different medical device company for 4 years previously. And a lot of my Hebrew actually came through work. So I grew up going to Jewish day school. I learned Hebrew in school for 12 years, came to Israel, couldn't speak it for the life of me, did all pun, could speak it a little bit better, but, not too well. And I actually think the best way to learn Hebrew is to work at a company that forces you to use it. So my actual work has always been in English, but my coworkers were Israeli, and I worked in many hospitals. So I was dealing with hospital staff and doctors. So I was forced to hear Hebrew and use Hebrew day in, day out in conversation. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. So my work was in English, but my speaking and hearing was all in Hebrew, and that is no doubt how I became fluent in the language. So I wouldn't say I had great Hebrew going in. I don't think I think there are massive opportunities if you don't have good Hebrew here, especially in high tech. But I would say that if you are looking to become fluent, it's important to find a work environment, I think, that will either have some Israelis that you could practice with, because a lot of Olim will make Aliyah move into a startup and only be surrounded by Olim, and you're only speaking English all day. Your Hebrew is not going to improve. I'll tell you right now. So I think surrounding yourself with Hebrew speakers, either in the office, around the office, even if it's not in your team, outside of the office, to find like a speaking partner. Everyone on Secret Tel Aviv is looking for, someone wants to learn English or Spanish or Hebrew. And I just think it's important to force yourself to use it. You're never going to become fluent if you don't get over the fear of making mistakes, sounding like an idiot. Just, jump into the deep end, surround yourself in the language. And that, I think, is the best advice I could give you about the language and the workforce.
Thank you. Okay, so actually I wanted to continue the employment related questions. Morty, could you tell us a bit about what are the common fields that Olim are working in Tel Aviv? What do most people do there? What job opportunities are there in that area?
Yeah, I can speak to Jerusalem. I can't speak to Tel Aviv.
Good, that's
Even
what you're here for.
right. Yeah, so the Jerusalem job scene is very interesting, and it has developed tremendously over the past couple of years. In Israel, high tech is a very big thing, and people throw that word around left and right. I can even say I work in high tech when I work in communications, because I work with high tech companies. But it's, everyone's dream to be in high tech, and Jerusalem's really jumped on board. So you've got different areas of Jerusalem that are considered the high-tech centers. I work in Har Chotzvim, which is sort of by Ramot and sort of by Romema area, also near the Hebrew University campus of Har Tzofim, for those that are familiar. Har Chotzvim, that's where Mobileye is, that's where Intel is, Cisco. There's so many huge companies that are involved in the tech world that are based there in Jerusalem. Now, on the other side of things, Talpiot is also, moving ahead with their development of, startup world in Jerusalem. That's really becoming a new hub and center for those startup, smaller companies that are, just getting started. And interestingly, when we talk about startups, you can also mention Givat Ram, which is the other campus of Hebrew U, and that's where Lightrix is based. And they have, for those that are familiar with Lightrix, they do app image filtering and editing and things like that. And they actually unicorned this past year, which is really, really cool for them. And there's just so many other startups that get their start over there. When it comes to other job opportunities that exist, for a lot of us, Jerusalem is that spiritual base and location where, a lot of people go to gap year study programs. And so a lot of people enter the educational field here. And you also have, of course, a lot of the health side. So you have people that are nurses and doctors and social workers, and definitely, trying to provide in that aspect. And I think that pretty much covers it, unless I'm missing something. I mean, I guess food is huge here. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Absolutely. Okay, can we talk a bit about continuing that high-tech field, and like Morty said, everyone's dying to get into it. Are there opportunities in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv? I'm happy for anyone to answer this. I guess Morty a bit touched on what are the opportunities outside of high tech that exist in Jerusalem. So maybe actually we'll focus in Tel Aviv, Eric and Shlomi. While it feels like everyone's working in high tech in one capacity or another, if you're not looking for that route or you're looking for something else, what opportunities are there for you? Do you think that there are opportunities outside of high tech for people in Tel Aviv? Eric, do you want to start?
Yeah, I don't work in high tech. I work for an NGO. I actually know quite a few people who work for NGOs. By and large, yes, you're right. The prominent industry is high tech, but as Morty alluded to, that's very vague. You don't have to be a coder or a developer to work in high tech. Aside though from those industries, and I will just say one more thing about high tech. If you're not a proficient Hebrew speaker, you can easily get by in high tech because many of the companies are dealing with outside. That being said, there is a lot of other opportunity. I have friends and acquaintances who've come over with varying levels of education. Those who have, like Morty said, friends who are doctors and work in medical professions, or those with master's degrees in different fields. I have friends that work for U.S. companies and are able to do it remotely, like real estate, for example, and are able to take their jobs with them. But then again, I have friends who never went to college and are able to find jobs working in different fields. The hospitality industry employs a lot of people, especially if you speak English. It provides a lot of opportunities. People that are working in tourism, of course, right now it's not such a big field, but in the pre-corona times and hopefully very soon afterwards, tourism is a big opportunity. I worked in tourism for a little while and really, really enjoyed it. Education also provides a lot of opportunity, either working with like preschool and elementary school age or even higher education. I think other large industries that you can get involved with, even working at retail or in an interim period, especially if you're just getting on your feet. I know quite a few people who were able to really make a good living working at bars and restaurants, even without speaking Hebrew, and actually learned a lot of Hebrew by doing that. So the opportunities are out there. And like Morty said, high tech is a big, very, very vast world, which can mean a whole bunch of things. The majority of big companies are, but I think that if you look, a lot of smaller businesses provide a lot of opportunity outside of the high tech world.
So actually, you're touching on something super important that everyone says before you come to Israel. Like all of us, it sounds like everyone's kind of drawing on their friends' experiences and bringing that into their answers. And when you come here, you kind of naturally, like we said, the communities here are so receptive to it, and it kind of pushes you into this environment where you're kind of naturally networking all the time, just because you're looking for a social life and you're looking for your own personal community. And obviously that spills over also into professional networking, just because community and social interactions can also become professional networking opportunities. And people talk a lot about how networking to find a job in Israel is such a critical piece of it. LinkedIn and your CV and going to events and leveling up your skills are all part of it, but really the main piece is the network, particularly in Israel as opposed to other places around the world. Can we talk for a second about networking when you first make Aliyah? It's before you have a community here, it's before you have a really well-developed network. Maybe you didn't go to the army or spend some time here in university, so you're really kind of at a disadvantage, or it's easy to think that you're at a disadvantage in creating that network. Can any of you reflect on kind of what it's like to start building that network? Did you or do you know of people who network before they come to Israel? Is that what you would recommend? How do you recommend people get started on that? And just kind of reflect on how the network serves as an important part of job searching here in Israel. Morty, do you want to start maybe?
Yeah, sure thing. I think networking is so it's so Israeli, you know. It's something that we pride ourselves on. It's something that gets you those positions, gets you those jobs that that we're all looking for. And I think it starts with just, you know, taking that first step towards opening up and reaching out to people. You know, there's so many people here in Israel that are willing to help, and you know, in the startup world, there are all these incentives to bring a friend to come and work with you at the company. So without a doubt, people are always looking for friends that are, you know, that are going to work with them. But also, you know, because I feel like everyone here knows someone that works in a field that you're interested in. So if you want to get into health tech, you know, someone will ask me, who do I know? And I'll say, actually, I know a couple people. Let me put you in touch. Same with the NGO field, whatever that is. There's so many amazing nonprofits here in Jerusalem that all my friends work at. So, you know, just by creating your actual community, you will be networking simultaneously, and you will be making these fantastic connections that allow you to branch out and help each other out. And there's so many friends we're looking for positions, and you know, it's just friends helping out friends. My roommate, actually, he was looking for a job in the logistic field, and my colleague's roommate works at a different company, and she told her that they were looking for someone in logistics, and she told me, and I told him, and he works there now. So, you know, it's just a small world, and we just have to embrace that small world, embrace the power of the networking, and the results speak for themselves.
I want to make an important note. I think the term networking can sound a little bit intimidating. And I think Morty touched upon like something super important, that it's really just reaching out, you know, reaching out to anybody you know about anything. For example, I got connected to my first job here because when I was still in New York, I was at Kiddush Club after shul, and I was talking to my friend's uncle, and he just asked, what do you want to do when you get to Israel? And I told him, I don't really know. I studied biology. I want to be in the sciences somehow. And he just connected me. He was in the medical device field, and he connected me to the CEO of a company he was familiar with in Israel. And it just kind of snowballed from a talk and a meeting and a resume into a job offer. And I think it's just letting everyone you know who might know someone in Israel in some field what you're looking for, and everyone wants to help. I think I get, you know, 3 to 4 resumes weekly from friends of friends of friends who want to, you know, get into med tech or high tech, or if I know someone. So just talk to everybody. Let everyone know what you're thinking of, what you might want to do. Someone knows someone. The Jewish world is very small, especially Olim, especially in Israel. Just, you could call it networking, you could call it putting yourself out there. You could just, you know, just say it's talking to friends. But don't be afraid or don't be shy to ask for help. And then when you get here, there will be plenty of events where you actually have to go network and take the jump and put yourself out there and tell random strangers about yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's actually a question here that I think touches on like another layer of that, about people who are coming who are already professionals, who already have work experience in America and kind of making that transition. So if I'm not mistaken, that's not any of us here, but I'm sure that each of us have friends and people that we can reflect on their experiences and kind of share on that. Is there anyone who wants to share about that? Yeah, Morty.
A friend of mine just made Aliyah 7 weeks ago. And, you know, a year ago, a couple months ago, when he was looking into Aliyah, he started reaching out to different companies here. And, you know, he has extensive experience in the professional, workforce in America. And he reached out to a very big company here, Deloitte, actually. And he had a conversation with them, and they just said, listen, we know you want to pivot into a different field, but you sound fantastic. You sound amazing. You know, we're ready to move forward and hire you right now. Your experience is so relevant, you know, and obviously your English proficiency is exactly what we're looking for. You know, so that's absolutely something that that we want on our team. So for him, it was definitely very easy to make that transition and he kind of came here with the position waiting for him. And obviously he interviewed more in-depthly before he made Aliyah to make sure everything was set. But that professional experience can be used to your advantage, without a doubt.
Yeah, Eric.
Yeah,
Thanks, Marty.
actually, coincidentally enough, I have a friend who was a similar situation with the exact same company. She had been traveling for a while. She came to Israel on a visa. She hasn't been working for a while, maybe doing freelance work here and there. Reached out to somebody at Deloitte, said, I'm interested to figure out what's going on. She had experience in financial management in Chicago. And they said, I know that you're looking for something. We actually have a position open. And last week, she also started with Deloitte. I think for the most part, it's always an asset to have experience. When I made Aliyah, I was 27 years old. The majority of people that were in my age bracket didn't have any experience. So that actually gave me a leg up, meaning that I was a college graduate. I had been working for 5 years in a professional field, and the majority of my contemporaries had done the army. They'd done their tiyul shnati, traveling, came back, and most of them had only just finished college. So coming in with that experience, I didn't start in an entry-level job. I started in a management position because I had the experience coming in, that even though I was at the same level as the same age as as many of the other people that would come in, I had that experience. It was only an asset. And one of the other things that Shlomit and Morty also touched on is reaching out to people. I'll give a short plug for Nefesh B'Nefesh, actually, because one of the first things when I said I was making Aliyah, and I had no plan, and anybody who says that they want to come to Israel and know that they're going to have a job, good luck to you. It's very, very hard to do so. And what Nefesh B'Nefesh told me, I made an appointment with the employment office. And I said, I want to know what I'm doing. I want to know where my job's going to be, and I want to know where I'm going to go live. And the problem is that many people who are making Aliyah, until you get to Israel, for the majority of the employers, it's theoretical. Making a big move to the other side of the world is not such an easy thing. Some people get cold feet, other things happen, things change, whatever it is, and there's nothing like a face-to-face interview in order for people to really know who you are. And it's okay to not come with that job prospect, but you plan everything. So I sat down with Nefesh B'Nefesh ahead of time. They helped me translate my resume into Hebrew. I set up a meeting my first week in Israel with one of the employment offices, and I sat down and I said, okay, here are the types of industries I'm looking at. What are the types of opportunities? Talking about the interviewing process, what to do and everything. But at the end of the day, I got my first job the same way that you said. I reached out to somebody that I went to Shabbat dinner, one of my first weeks, of a guy that a friend of mine that I hadn't seen in 2-3 years. I said, hey, I'm in Israel. Can I come over for Shabbat? You're in Israel? Oh my God, you should come over. And he says, what are you doing for work? I said, oh no. He says, send me your resume. I'll send that to a few people. By next week, I got four interviews with companies that I didn't even know before, just because of a few people that I reached out to who maybe I didn't even know that well. But if you scan on Facebook, if you look on the message boards, groups like Secret Tel Aviv, you'll see it'll pop up. The people that pop up to the top. That's how Facebook works. And even if it's somebody that maybe is an acquaintance of yours, you write to them a message on Facebook. You might not have their email address. You might not have their phone number. You say, hey, look, I'm looking to move to Israel. I'm planning to move to Israel. I see that you posted for a job. Can I send you my resume? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes, and even more so, I'm willing to help you. So I was very nervous because I didn't want to reach out to people that I hadn't been in such close contact with. I felt bad about, using them to try to get a job, but they were more happy to help me than I was afraid to ask them. And that's something that you really need to keep in mind. Don't be afraid to ask. And that's just how you start. And you can have, 1-2 interviews, and maybe it's not the dream job that you want. But at least you get your feet wet by doing an interview, and you can say, okay, this is for me or this isn't for me. Or what's an even better case, you get a job offer for a job that you think that you don't want, or maybe it's not the salary that you wanted, and then you can negotiate. And when I said to somebody, I really don't think that this job's for me, then they came back, they called me a week later, they said, okay, well, we'll give you more money. And at that point I already had another job. But it just goes to show you that you can wait to get the right job that you want. You don't need to take the first job that jumps at you because you're afraid of not having that stability. You get money for the first couple of months. The government is giving you a nice soft cushion that you don't need to be so nervous.
Thank you. Okay, so we're actually at the last few minutes. So I'd just love if we could go around and everyone kind of share some, if you had some parting words to share with everyone who joined us tonight. Really, any tips that you have for people who are at the brink of making their decision of coming here and at the brink of the decision between what city to start their journey in Israel. What tips do you have for people who are planning their Aliyah? Shlomi, should we start with you?
Yeah, of course. I actually think something Eric just said kind of sparked my biggest advice I give to people. It's great to come with a plan, but definitely be ready to go with the flow. You come here with a plan. It's great, as you want to feel comfortable, you want to feel like you've saved some money. This is where you want to maybe take your degree. This is where you want to take your job. Life throws things at you. New opportunities will come your way when you get here, things that you never thought would happen. I got here, I was so set on doing my master's degree, and all of a sudden I got this job offer, and I said to myself, you know what, I could always go back to school. Let me see where this takes me. And 8 years later, I have an amazing career, an amazing company, and I couldn't be happier. So I definitely think when it comes to, blanket advice, that's the best piece of advice I could give to someone. And I think community-wise, again, I think both Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and other communities are really wonderful. I do think Jerusalem has a growing young professional community, high-tech job opportunities, no question. I think it depends on what you're looking for. Maybe, you could come, try someplace for 6 months, a year, check out the other community on weekends, go visit some friends, and see just, what works for you. I never thought I'd end up in Tel Aviv. I didn't think there was a religious community. I didn't think it was for me. It wasn't the Israel I fell in love with that made me Zionist and want to make Aliyah. It was just a city and a beach and whatever. And at the end of the day, it was the community I ended up falling in love with, and could not be happier with the life I have here. So I think just go with it, be open-minded, try different things, maybe sublet, come sublet for 6 months, check out the other communities, check out the other cities, and see where it takes you.
Eric, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I echo everything that Shlomit said, so I won't get into that. I would say be patient. It is very disorienting, even if you've been to Israel on a gap year and you've been many times and you feel like you have your friends that have made Aliyah and you see this world. Every experience is unique and everybody has a different experience, and it's hard. And it's okay that it's hard, because when I look back on my experiences here, my first year was not easy at all. By not doing Ulpan, I felt like I missed out on this soft cushion to make a group of friends and to be in this interim period where I'm still on my gap year program, years later and everything like that. But when I look back on everything that's happened, I think one of my biggest accomplishments in my life is the fact that I was able to move to another country, that I was able to acclimate to another culture and find a balance between being in this other country, but also finding the stuff that are your comfort zone. You wanna have that comfort zone to fall back into when you're struggling, when you're having periods of doubt, when you're dealing with a lot of the unknown things. And that's really, really important to have, but it's also really important to push the boundaries. Try to do something that maybe is outside the realm of the norm, something that maybe you didn't think that you would do, or maybe you're in an environment where you feel uncomfortable, because the more that you push yourself to get out of your comfort zone, the more that you'll find not only are you then acclimating to life in Israel, but you feel more accomplished doing it because it's something that you did on your own. It's something that you did. Your family's not coming with you by and large. It's something that many of your friends and other contemporaries are not doing. So by virtue of the fact that you're taking the step to come to Israel, you're succeeding. And the way that you do it is very, very individual, and nobody can tell you that there's a right way or wrong way. You have to feel out and see what's right for yourself.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you. All right, Morty, finish us up.
All right. I feel like they just about covered everything, and I agree with everything that was just said by Eric and Shlomit. And just to once again touch upon some of the things that we've spoken about this past, Zoom hour, I think both Jerusalem and Tel Aviv have so much to offer. And I think that, if you are checking out both communities, both areas, like definitely go for Shabbat. Definitely see the people when they're not in their busy, hectic, lives, and like see how the people really live and connect. And like we spoke about before, when it comes to networking, you definitely need to just put yourself out there. And that just means talking, reaching out to friends, saying, hi, how are you? How'd you do it? How'd you get to where you are? And how can I get there? Do you know someone who actually studied what I studied? What are they doing now? Can you connect me? It's that easy, that simple. Everyone here, just like Eric was saying, we left our families, back in wherever we're from. Our friends that are here become our families, and they're so willing to help in both Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. So really take advantage of that. And the last thing I would say is, while it's super important to learn Hebrew and break your teeth, as we say, and really try and figure it out, English is your best asset. And there's so many companies here professionally that are looking for Anglos to help them with whatever it is that they need. So that's a very good ace to have up your sleeves.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you all so much for spending tonight with us and sharing all of your insights. Your experiences are really beneficial and inspiring, even for me, that even if I live here already. And I hope that for everyone watching that this was able to give you some insight, some advice, some practical advice, inspirational advice. And we're going to be sending out the recording of tonight and the contact information. So if you have any follow-up questions or want to kind of continue this networking venture, making friends venture, then you'll be invited to do so. So thank you again to everyone for joining us, and to Morty and Shlomit and Eric for your time tonight. And we're looking forward to seeing all of you in Israel. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Guys.